Introducing Fred Kaufman.
I'm really excited to be here today to share some information with you. Usually when I take the stage, I see a lot of people in the audience looking at me thinking, why should I be listening to you? Why should I believe anything you have to say? Who are you? Well, I'm not anybody special. I'm really not any different than you are. What makes me different is my life story. I've had a lot of things happen in my life that brought me or pushed me really to where I am today. But before I get started, I want to just give you a little statement that was quoted by an ancient philosopher 500 years before Christ. And this statement has really stuck in my mind, and you'll know why when I say it. He said, "Sometimes the truth is so unbelievable it escapes becoming known." Let me say it again. Sometimes the truth is so unbelievable it escapes becoming known. Now just think about that for a minute. How could the truth escape becoming known? Well, if it was unbelievable. In other words, if people didn't accept it, then it would escape becoming known. People would just push it off to the side. And that really reminds me of what has happened to the information I'm going to share with you. I'm not really such a brilliant person. I don't have a laboratory that I stay up in late at night looking under a microscope. But I do have a gift of a logical mind. And if things don't make sense to me, it's hard for me to accept. And by contrast, if something does make sense to me, even if it goes against what is normally accepted in the mainstream, that's what I stick with. If it doesn't make sense, maybe you need to question it. To tell you a little bit about my background, I really have to go back to my childhood, and this is what really pushed me to get into this field that I'm in. I grew up with a lot of health problems. I should say I was born with a lot of health problems. I had a bad heart, I had severe allergies, I had severe asthma. By the time I was 8 years old, I had been stricken with polio. This was 1958. Just imagine, we don't really hear about polio much anymore, but in 1958, kids were dying of polio. And I remember not really being afraid to die, but I was afraid for my parents having to go through my death. And I cried out to God for the first time and I said, please heal me, because I know it would be devastating to my parents. And you know, I was miraculously healed. I was only in the hospital about 2 weeks, and to this day, I don't have any symptoms from that experience with polio. I bring that up just to not get you to be feeling sorry for me, but just to let you know that there has been a pattern, a set of signposts, mile markers through my life that made me realize that somehow I was connected to God. I'm not saying that I was anybody special, but I knew that God was trying to do something, get my attention at different points during my life. And that was the first one that I can remember when I reached out to God, and He answered me. That was in 1958, and I remember going to the doctor and listening to him tell my parents once more how bad I was. And a very prophetic thing happened. I remember looking up at that doctor just like it was yesterday, and I said, couldn't I take vitamins or something to help build myself up? Remember, this was 1958. We didn't have health food stores in the mall like we do today. We didn't even have malls yet. So it was a very unusual thing for a little kid to say in 1958. So again, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just trying to set the background for where I came from. Well, by the time I got into college, I was taking 2 shots in each arm twice a week of an experimental allergy treatment that was basically called systematic desensitization. They were injecting me with those things that I was allergic to, hoping to set my body up to have a little bit more normal immune response. In other words, trying to make me desensitize me to those things that I was reacting to or overreacting to. 2 shots in each arm twice a week. I did that for a year. And afterwards, I remember telling my doctor, I'm not going to do this anymore. And he said, why? What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, this is the best medical science has to offer. And I said, well, it's not good enough for me. It's not working. I quit. And I left the doctor's office and started to do my own research. This began a 40-year career of doing research on health and nutrition. What causes health? What causes unhealth? And how do you restore health if you've had a lot of problems? To my amazement, with the information I learned, a few supplements, and some dietary changes, I was healed of the symptoms that had plagued me for 19 years. I was motivated. I was excited. I was amazed. Why didn't the doctors know about this? Why did I have to go find it out for myself? It was what would somehow later become almost common knowledge that diet has an influence on your health. Most people would assume that's correct, but back then doctors thought that was a joke. The only way to treat disease is with drugs and surgery. That's the schooling that they've had. They haven't had schooling in nutrition, so it seems like a joke to them. Well, this went on for about 10 years, and I was really starting to enjoy life for those 10 years, and I started getting involved with, not in a dramatic way, but I started doing some physical things. And one of the things that I liked to do was to ride a bicycle. And I lived out in the country, and I would ride this bike long distance. And this is where the second prophetic thing happened in my life. And I had been riding my bicycle through this little town, and it was a little farm town, and they were having a town-wide garage sale. Everybody had their garage door up, and there were things in the driveway, and it was a town-wide sale. But here I was on a bicycle. Why would I stop anywhere? I didn't have any way to carry anything. But something compelled me to stop at this one house. This was the last day, the end of the day of this weekend garage sale. And I stopped at this little house, and I saw a table there, and it had some old books on it. And I was a little bit interested to see what these books were. And I saw 2 books that really caught my attention. One of them was a little Bible, a little leather-bound Bible. It was old, and it looked like it had really been abused. It had what appeared to be knife slices in the cover of it. And I turned it over. It had a price of 10 cents. And I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I don't buy this Bible. Would they just throw it away? And literally, I felt like I was rescuing God's Word when I bought that 10-cent Bible. And there was another book, and it was an old health book. It was simply titled Acid and Alkaline. Those two books changed my life, had a profound influence on my life. Of course, you can imagine the Bible, why it influenced me, but the book on acid and alkaline opened my eyes to some principles about health that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that there was a balance in all living things, having to do with internal chemistry, having to do with an acid-alkaline balance, acid being the opposite of alkaline. I was surprised to learn that most living things are alkaline, including humans, and that through dietary influences from what we eat and what we drink, we can actually shift that balance toward the acid side. And this starts the influence of health problems. In other words, a lot of the problems we have with our health aren't because we were just randomly stricken with disease, as the doctors believe, or we inherited these things, but it's actually caused by things that we do to ourselves, things that we didn't know were causing a bad influence on our health. But we have an internal environment, and that internal environment has a chemistry. And that chemistry has a balance. When it gets out of balance, bad things start to happen. Slowly at first. You might notice when you first start becoming more acidic that you start having some aches and pains. Then you find out that if you become a little bit more acidic that you start having more frequent colds and flu. And then you might find out that you're starting to experience some lack of energy and weakness. And then it can go all the way to the extreme where you're starting to really develop some very complicated symptoms that put you in the category of certain diseases. But all of this started me in the direction of satisfying an insatiable curiosity about cancer, which was quite unusual. I didn't have any family history of cancer. I'd never known anybody with cancer. Why was I so curious about the cause and treatment of cancer? But something was pulling me in that direction. My friends thought I had a death wish. They thought it was a pretty morbid subject to be studied. They wanted to go out and party, and I was wanting to read books. But the long and short of it is, I studied for about 5 years, heavily focused on cancer. If I came across a story of someone who had survived cancer, I would do my best to try to contact them and find out, what did you do? And then I started thinking, if one person could survive cancer, why can't more people survive cancer? And I thought, it's because of a lack of information. People don't know that there's a possibility of overcoming this disease. That was like a death sentence. If somebody was told they had cancer, it was a pretty gloomy day. Most people didn't survive. Well, about 5 years later, another interesting thing happened that started to blend all of this information into a focal point. And it was when my mother came home from the Mayo Clinic and she had been diagnosed with cancer. She had melanoma in the 4th and final stage. And the doctors said there was no hope. They said she would only have a few months to live, maybe 6 months tops. And my mother said, okay, well, what kind of treatment are you going to give me? And they said, there is no treatment. She said, chemotherapy? They said, no, there's no chemotherapy to help you. She said, radiation, how about radiation? They said, no, radiation doesn't help your type of cancer. So she came home pretty dejected. And I remember hearing her on the phone calling clinics all over the country, wanting to find somebody that would take a chance to try to help her. But when they found out what the doctors at the Mayo Clinic had to say, they discouraged her. There's nothing we can do either. She called as far away as Greece to an experimental clinic over there that was helping people with cancer. And they said, you may not survive the trip over here. Don't waste your time. And I remember one day thinking, I wonder if all this information I've learned, I wonder if it could possibly help my mom. And I remember I had a piece. This was my mom who had nursed me all these years growing up when I was sick, dragging me off to the hospitals, dragging me off to the doctor, and yet now she was in trouble. And I just wondered if maybe somehow the information I had could help her. And I remember approaching her and I said, Mom, I think I know how to beat this thing. And she said, what could you possibly know that the doctors at the Mayo Clinic don't know? And I said, Mom, I think it's pretty simple. They're approaching it in the wrong direction. They're looking at the tumors and they're attacking the tumors. They're wanting to cut them out. They're wanting to poison them. They're wanting to burn them. But that doesn't always work. The cancer seems to want to spread, or the people get really, really sick from the treatments. And oftentimes I think that the people are actually dying of the treatments, not the cancer itself. It's devastating to the immune system to take chemotherapy. You need a strong immune system. Radiation, as we've known from Hiroshima, Chernobyl, it causes cancer. It makes no sense to me that they're treating cancer with things that cause cancer. I said, I think what has happened is you have an internal environment, and when that internal environment gets out of balance, bad things can happen. What we need to do is come up with a plan to change your internal environment back to the way it was before you had cancer. And I know my mom loved me, but she was scared. But it ended up, she said, okay, I'll do whatever you say. So the only way I knew at that time to help somebody become more alkaline was to eat a raw fruit and vegetable diet. Nothing but. That means no animal food whatsoever, no cooked food whatsoever, no canned food. And that was tough for my mom. But she did it. She only drank spring water, only ate raw fruits and vegetables. Well, she was still scared though. She didn't know if that was going to work. There was no history or experience of mine where I'd helped somebody with this kind of a protocol. And so she wanted to keep going back to Mayo Clinic to find out how much time have I got. And this was something she did every couple of weeks. It was an 8-hour trip one way, but every couple of weeks she wanted to go back to find out how much time have I got. Funny thing though, with all their testing, they kept finding out that she was getting better, not worse. Huh. She also took some vitamins. She also took a few herbs. And after 6 months of getting better and better and better, through repeated testing at the Mayo Clinic, they decided to do a second exploratory surgery. The first one had revealed the cancer, and the second one revealed the cancer was gone. The doctor came running out of the operating room to find my dad and my sister, nearly jumping up and down, saying, it's a miracle, there's no cancer. She was still opened up on the operating table. How did he know that? Well, melanoma is an unusual cancer in that it's always black. And so when this doctor looked at her the first time in her first surgery 6 months before, he saw black tumors. When he looked at her the second time, there was no blackness to the tumors. They sent the tumors to the laboratory, they tested them, they were non-cancerous. Mayo Clinic doesn't usually ask for a second opinion, but they sent these tumors out to another laboratory to get a second opinion because it was so unusual. Well, they wouldn't declare her cured, they said, for at least 5 years. So she kept going back and forth to the Mayo Clinic because they convinced her that this kind of cancer spreads or it comes back. I took her myself over 25 times during that 10-year period. But fortunately, there was no cancer. She's 85 years old today and still alive, cancer-free. Another thing happened. There was a reporter that wrote an article about her story. He had heard at a cancer support group meeting that she had helped start. And she wanted to encourage people not to give up hope. And the article was titled, Miracle Lady Cheats Death. And if you want to, you can go to her website and read her first article. And then there was a follow-up article 10 years later saying Miracle Lady 10 years later was the title. So you can go to miraclelady.net, miraclelady.net, and that's the articles about my mom. Well, we got a lot of phone calls from other people who were dying of cancer because of that article. And so we started sharing the information. They all want to know, what did you do? So we told them. And other people started experiencing miracles. There was another lady who made medical history by delivering a baby full term, even though she had lung cancer and was pronounced terminal. She also made national news. Well, this was rather aggravating to the doctors, and I was surprised by that. I would think that these doctors would want to know, what did these people do? These people were coming back to the doctor, and the doctor was examining them and saying, our tests show you don't have cancer anymore. The tumors are either almost gone or completely gone in a relatively short period of time. And none of these doctors were curious about it. In fact, they were angry about it. They tried to discourage people from going on this raw fruit and vegetable diet and taking supplements, saying there was no reason to do that. There was no science behind it. There was no connection between diet and cancer. Another thing happened. My mom met up with a guy who was a famous cancer doctor. He was actually President Reagan's doctor. She found an article about him and called him on the phone. And we ended up, the three of us, being on a television program, a Christian show that was aired nationwide. And we spent 2 days, 2 hours basically talking about cancer and how to prevent it, and didn't really talk about what to do if you had cancer because we weren't really allowed to. And that's been a pretty interesting thing. But my mom wanted to know if there wasn't an easier way to become more alkaline or change that internal environment. And I said, Mom, this is all I know. And she said, well, keep researching. You need to keep looking for an easier way. And then another prophetic thing. This was the third prophetic thing that I remember happening in my life. I got a call from a scientist in Sweden. And I said, how'd you find out about me? And he said, a friend of mine in Australia. And when I got off the phone, I was nearly jumping up and down, and I told my mom, I said, God's getting ready to do something. And she said, what do you mean? What'd that guy say? And I said, it wasn't anything he said. It's the circumstances. I don't know anybody in Sweden, and I don't know anybody in Australia either. Must have been a newspaper article. And so we started sharing information about what we'd each learned about cancer. And then after many months went by, he said, I believe minerals are far more important than vitamins. And I said, I agree. But what do? There are so many mineral products on the market. If they were really as beneficial as we know minerals should be, why aren't there testimonials about people getting healed with these products? We need to search the world over and find the best mineral product. And so we did. And I remember it's a long, involved story of all the research that we did, all the experimenting, all the products we sampled. But eventually he called me up and he said, I think I found it. Coral calcium from Okinawa. And I have to tell you, my heart kind of sank. I thought, that's just what the world needs, another calcium supplement. There were already so many on the market. We knew there wasn't a lot of positive testimonies about these products. But I knew he wouldn't be wasting my time, so I started to investigate it. He connected me with some people that had information and had some products. I even sampled the product. My mom sampled it. You have to understand, I was taking 35 tablets and capsules a day of various supplements. I stopped all that and just used this product. It was a little sachet. It came in a little foil packet. And it was this little miniature tea bag is what it looks like. If I can get it out. And you simply put it in your drinking water and then drink that water throughout the day, preferably a couple of quarts, half gallon. And as you drink that water, a lot of interesting things happen. Let me back up. As you put it into the water, a lot of interesting things happen. First of all, it raises the pH. It makes the water more alkaline. And wow, that was really interesting to me. I had been looking for something that would influence alkalinity. And I thought, wow, that's pretty simple. Put this little tea bag in some water and drink it. You've got alkaline water. That ought to be easier than eating just a raw fruit and vegetable diet. And so I felt better than I ever had in just 3 days. My mom felt better, had more energy, and just seemed to feel her youth coming back. And we started getting other testimonials from people that had used the product that we had sampled out to. And I wondered, how is this working? Well, back to this internal environment. You're 70% water. Your blood's about 90% water. Would it make a difference what kind of water that is? What if you could flush out that water, kind of give yourself an oil change, flush that water out and replace it with the best water in the world? And that's what this is. And what's the evidence? Well, in 1979, the Guinness Book of Records authenticated the world's oldest living man. He was 115 years old and lived on one of the Okinawa Islands at the southern end of Japan. And all the publicity about this guy alerted doctors and scientists in Japan to come and investigate and see what was so unique about him. After an exhaustive inquiry, they found out he wasn't unique at all. In fact, what they found out was that he had lived a long, industrious life. he actually had 2 world records. He had also had the longest career. He had worked until he was 105, and his job involved physical labor. It wasn't until sometime later that a Japanese professor came forward and revealed the secret. He said, it's the water. I've been studying the water for some 40 years around the world, and particularly in Japan, and the water in Okinawa is different than the water on the other islands, and it's different even than any place else in the world. And it's because of the landmass. The landmass is made of an ancient coral reef, much like Hawaii is made of lava. You dig down below the dirt in Hawaii and you hit lava. You dig below the dirt in Okinawa, you hit coral. So all the water these people were drinking had been influenced by these minerals. And he said one more thing. I found out in research that the Japanese Ministry of Health, keeping track of the statistics of why people die for 100 years or more, didn't realize that the people of Okinawa weren't dying at the same rate as those on the other islands of the top 3 causes of death: heart disease, stroke, and cancer. There were 4 times as many people in Okinawa living past 100, or were older than 100 years old, 4 times as many as there were on the other islands. So something crazy was going on there. And this professor said it's the water. In fact, if you look around the world, you'll find there's about 5 or 6 places where people live longer and healthier than people around them, and they always find, after investigation, it's the water. It's always water that was mineral rich. Now you have the opportunity to make that kind of water by just putting these little packets into any old water. You can even use tap water. And what happens? As I said, it creates alkaline water, and it changes your internal water that has maybe, because of dietary influences, what you drink, maybe gotten a little bit too acid, and maybe you were experiencing some health problems. We've had a lot of people that got better. We can't say this treats anything. It doesn't treat anything. We're not treating disease. What we're doing is changing that 70% of you to see if that makes a difference in your health. Look, we've all heard of scurvy. Scurvy is a disease. It's listed in the medical books as a disease. It can be deadly, but it's a vitamin C deficiency. No surgery will help. Chemotherapy won't help. Radiation won't help. There's no drugs that'll help. The only thing that'll help scurvy is vitamin C. It's a vitamin C deficiency. You can't take B vitamins. You can't take D. You can't take anything else except vitamin C, but when you do, the symptoms go away. It's a deficiency. I mentioned another product in these testimonials, ionite. Interesting thing happened. I kept looking at these little sachets, and no matter how long I left them in the water, even if I dumped them out, the granules didn't dissolve. And I kept thinking, because I had this megadose mentality, if 500 milligrams of vitamin C is good for you, what happens if you take 5,000? My mom was taking 45,000 a day while she was trying to overcome her cancer. How could it be? These granules don't dissolve, and yet people drink this water. It didn't make sense to me. But I had to start rethinking. It's the water. The water has become like a tonic. These minerals are affecting that water, even on a molecular level. On this website, aqualyte.info, AQUALYTE.info, you'll see pictures that Dr. Emoto, a Japanese scientist, took of water freezing, droplets of tap water versus water that he added the aqualyte to and took other photographs, and now the water changed from some irrecognizable shape to a beautiful crystalline snowflake structure. More evidence that this changes the molecular structure of the water. As I said before, what would happen if you change the water that's 70% of you? So I kept trying to figure out a way, did some experiments, couldn't figure it out. One day I got a call from this lady, and she's asked me questions about the aqualyte, wanted me to give her some ammunition to talk to her doctor about it. And during that conversation, she gave me or led me to the secret to dissolve these granules. And I was able to come up with this other product, ionite. And I ended up marrying this girl. Well, what else could I do? I was either going to have to marry her or shoot her. She knew too much. And we've been married for 15 years. What did I have, though? A liquid version of these coral granules? That's what I thought. But in the process, I used organic complexes from plants to help to get these granules to dissolve. Now, to let you know what organic complexes are, we all know, or you should know by now, that our soils are mineral deficient because of chemical farming. Most nutritionists out there would tell you that you need to take a mineral supplement because the soils are deficient, the plants aren't taking up the minerals, they're not passing them on to the fruits and vegetables we eat. We're mineral deficient as well as the plants and the soils. But I got a secret for you. You can't bypass the plant. The plant's a factory. How else can you explain getting a red tomato from a green plant? They're manufacturing things. And I found out something interesting in my research, that when the plants are grown in mineral deficient soil, the fruits and vegetables have fewer nutrients. There's a direct correlation between the nutrients in the fruits and vegetables and the level of minerals in the soil. I don't have time to tell you everything about how that works, but plants need minerals to manufacture nutrients. Especially the building blocks which are in the organic complexes. Ionite has those building blocks. It has traces of amino acids, traces of vitamins, traces of enzymes, and of course minerals. All the minerals that you need are in there. And I started to take this product, and I wondered the same, what was it going to do for me? And in a very short amount of time, I don't even remember if it was the first day or if it was within a couple, 3 days, but all my digestive problems disappeared. I had severe problems with acid reflux, even had a hiatal hernia, all gone after putting this in my water along with the Aqualite in just a very short time. Then I had an accident. I injured my leg really bad on some jagged concrete. The pain was so severe I started to go into a mild shock. My wife looks at my leg. It's got this big bump on it. Looked like somebody stuck a hard-boiled egg under my skin, and this big massive bruise that was starting to turn black and purple very quickly. And she said, "You want me to put some ionite on it?" And I'm like, "I don't care." I had no hope that this was going to help. She started spraying the ionite on my leg, and I'm not kidding you, within less than 2 hours, the bump was gone, and so was the bruise. Now, doctors tell me when I've made this presentation before with other audiences, they said, "We can believe a lot of things you're saying, but you can't get rid of a bruise in less than 2 hours. It takes at least 7 to 10 days. You don't do it in 2 hours." Well, later on, my wife fell down some stairs, ended up with a big bump and bruise on her leg, sprayed the ionite on there. We knew what to do now. Sprayed it on there, and the bump and bruise were gone in less than 5 minutes. We have witnesses. What else will it do? Well, that spring in our little 5-acre little country estate, little farmhouse, I planted a garden where I've been making my own compost, growing organic fruits and vegetables, and I got a little too early with my tomato plants. The severe frost came, killed them all. I'm out in the garden starting to pull them up because they were black, laying flat on the ground, and my wife comes out there and she says, "Did you think about putting some ionite on them?" And I just laughed. I said, "Honey, they're dead. They wouldn't have any way to circulate it." She said, "Well, if they're dead, it wouldn't hurt them, would it?" What do you do? So I didn't even know how to make it up, but I put a tablespoon per gallon of water and put a half a gallon of water on each one of these plants. 3 days later, I came back out to my garden, and these plants were dark green, standing up straight. They grew twice as big as any plants we'd ever grown before. Without the frost damage, we're now able to grow 8-foot tall tomato plants. Not kidding. So it helped the plants. And I started wondering, what else can it do? And I started to get feedback from other people as I started to pass this product out. And they were saying, it has a high energy. And I said, a high energy? Huh, never even thought of that. But as we started to learn more and more about it, we realized that it did have a high energy, and we later on even found a way to enhance that energy even more. But I want to tell you a little demonstration of that. There was a company interested in marketing our product, and when we were talking to the head of product research and development about this energy thing, he said, our people in the lab don't know what you're talking about. Our entire research team that I've talked to about this whole concept of energy and water and minerals, they don't know what you're talking about. But we'd like to do an experiment. We're going to put 24 bottles of water, unlabeled, they'll just be numbered, into a case. We're going to send it to you. We want you to test it with that computer you were talking about. Let us know which bottle we put in 5 drops of ionite. We had it tested. The people called back and said, we can't test this water. And we said, what do you mean? You've tested all these other samples for us. They said, well, it's not that we can't test it, it's that all of them test exactly the same. That 5 drops of ionite had influenced all 23 other bottles, even though it never made contact with the water. Why would that make a difference to you and I? Another funny thing, I had a fall 25 years prior to the ionite and nearly broke my neck. I was a chronic patient of my chiropractor. Had one recurring question almost every time I went there for 25 years. I said, why don't I hold my adjustments? He said, we don't know. This man was taught by the son of the guy that invented chiropractic. He was a chiropractic historian. He written many articles about the subject. He was on the board of the first chiropractic college. His brother was a chiropractor. His nephew was a chiropractor. This guy knew a lot about the subject, and yet he had no idea why you don't hold your adjustments. And after I started taking the ionite, I didn't even realize at first, but months later, I told my wife, I said, I haven't needed the chiropractor. And she said, neither have I. Now, she had been in a bad car wreck and had whiplash. But after starting the ionite, she didn't need to go to the chiropractor anymore. Why would that be? Because you need energy. Acupuncturists know that. They're poking people with needles and getting results, unblocking energy fields. And I wonder, where do you get that energy in the first place? How were we designed to have an energy field, and how were we supposed to replenish that energy field from things that we take into our bodies? Because that's how everything else works. And I finally figured it out. It was from minerals. Minerals carry energy. Ionite has minerals that are energized. These minerals are also naturally energized. It'll build up your energy system. Some have called this liquid acupuncture because it's so effective. As I've told you, topically, your cells can do miraculous things if they have the raw materials. There's raw materials in here that your body needs. I could go on and on and on and on. There are no side effects from these products. You can give them to children. Even babies have had these products with no problems. It's water and minerals. I just want to leave you with this one statement. Is it possible for the truth to be so unbelievable that it escapes becoming known? Yeah, I've experienced it. And all I wanted to do was to share with you what I've experienced in trying to help people. And trying to help people with just 2 products. Is this all you need? I don't know. But I do know this. This is the foundation of health. If you don't start with the water that's 70% of your body, 90% of your blood, just about anything else you do is icing on a cake. What's in the cake? The foundation is water and minerals. You need air, of course, but you need water more than you need food. Again, I thank you for listening to me today. I hope I didn't bore you too badly. But go to these websites and look at the information and make a choice for yourself to do something about your health. Thank you.